All right, so let's talk about the Roman Empire. You probably picture, crumbling ruins, guys in armor, maybe a gladiator or two. And that's all true, but what if we looked at it a different way? What if we saw it not just as ancient history, but as, well, a blueprint, a design for building and running a massive civilization, something the world had never seen before? That's what we're going to do today. We're going to deconstruct that blueprint.
Okay, first things first, let's just try to wrap our heads around the size of this thing. At its absolute peak, under Emperor Trajan, the Roman Empire spanned 5 million square kilometers. I mean, think about that. You could be standing in the rainy fields of northern England and travel all the way to the scorching deserts of modern-day Iraq, and you'd still be in the Roman Empire. They controlled the entire Mediterranean Sea, which they literally called our sea, Mare Nostrum. Just incredible.
And it wasn't empty land either. We're talking about a population of up to 100 million people. Now, to really put that into perspective for you, at that point in history, that was somewhere between a sixth and a quarter of every single human being on the planet, all living under one government, one system. That's just mind-boggling.
So this wasn't just about grabbing land and controlling people. It was a whole mindset, a core belief. The poet Virgil summed it up perfectly with this phrase, imperium sine fine, an empire without end. And he wasn't just being poetic. This was a genuine belief that their rule was destined, that it was a divine gift with no limits. It was literally part of who they thought they were.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the blueprint for an empire. Then we'll see how they went from republic to empire. After that, we'll dive into the imperial operating system, how it all worked. We'll explore life in a Roman world for the average person. And finally, we'll wrap up with Rome's enduring legacy.
Okay. Moving on to Section 2, from Republic to Empire. Let's talk about installing that new operating system.
So before the empire, you had the Roman Republic. And in theory, it was great. You had elected officials, the Senate, but in practice, it was a mess. It was prone to constant civil wars and political chaos. I mean, we're talking 100 years of conflict. The big change comes with Augustus in 27 BC. He basically says, okay, enough of this. The whole system gets a reboot. All that power gets consolidated into one person, the emperor. And that, surprisingly, brought about a period of incredible stability.
So how did one guy get all that power legally? Well, it all comes down to this one key concept, imperium. Think of it as the ultimate authority, the power to command armies, to judge, the whole shebang. In the Old Republic, this power was temporary. You'd get it for a year, then give it back. What Augustus did, which was brilliant really, was he took that power and just kept it. He made himself the permanent commander, the imperator. And hey, that's where we get our word emperor from.
So what was the payoff for this huge political shift? What did the average person get out of it? Well, they got the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. And this was a huge deal. For 200 years, 2 centuries, there was relative peace and stability across this vast territory. For people who had only known civil war, this was everything. It was the system's biggest selling point, its greatest achievement.
Okay, Section 3, the imperial operating system. Let's look at the core components of power.
So how do you actually manage something this big? How do you keep it running? Well, it basically boiled down to 3 main pillars. You had the central government, with the emperor at the very top, making the final call on everything. Then you had the military, this incredible professional army that wasn't just for conquering, but also for keeping the peace. And maybe most importantly, you had the society itself, which was very deliberately layered and managed to keep everyone in their place.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Because look at these numbers. You've got a population of maybe 100 million people. In the army, the professional force keeping them all in line, at its absolute biggest, it was around 400,000 soldiers. So how on earth did so few control so many? I mean, the math doesn't seem to add up, right? Well, the secret wasn't just swords and spears. It was all about social engineering.
This is how they did it. Rome was built on a very strict social hierarchy, what they called the ordinus. Everyone knew their place. At the very top, you have the senatorial and equestrian orders, the super elite. But here's the clever part. They didn't try to rule every single town themselves. Instead, they got the local rich guys, the decurions, to do it for them. They gave them power and status, and in return, those local elites kept things running smoothly. This pyramid structure, all the way down from the common citizens, the plebs, to the enormous population of slaves, was the real tool of control.
And this wasn't just a social thing. It was literally written into the law. Roman society was divided into 2 basic legal categories: the honestariores, or the more honorable people, and the humaiores, the humbler folk. And let me tell you, justice was not blind. If you were a rich guy, you might get a fine for a crime. If you were a poor guy who did the exact same thing, you could be whipped, tortured, or even crucified. Your status in society directly determined how the law treated you. Simple as that.
Which brings us to Section 4, Life in a Roman World. Let's talk about the user experience.
So you're an average person living in the city of Rome. You don't have much political power anymore. What do? Well, the writer Juvenal had a pretty cynical take. He said the people only craved two things: bread and circuses. And you know what? He wasn't wrong. This basically became the unofficial government policy for keeping millions of people in a crowded city from rioting.
So, let's start with the bread. The government ran a program called the Cura Annae, the grain supply. This was, for all intents and purposes, a massive welfare system. We're talking free grain or bread for somewhere around 200,000 to 250,000 adult men in the city. And as time went on, the emperors kept adding more to the package: free olive oil, wine, even pork. This wasn't about being nice. This was a smart political tool to keep the population fed and quiet.
And then you have the circuses. And this number, it's just wild. By the time of Marcus Aurelius, there were 135 official public holidays a year. 135. That's more than a third of the entire year dedicated to state-funded entertainment. We're talking chariot races, massive festivals, and of course the gladiatorial games. It was all designed to be the ultimate distraction.
Okay, last section. Section 5, Rome's enduring legacy. Because even though the empire itself is long gone, its code is still running on our modern operating system.
I mean, its influence is absolutely everywhere once you start looking. Think about language. If you speak Spanish, French, or Italian, you're basically speaking modern Latin. Think about law. So many of our legal ideas come straight from the Romans. Look at our architecture. Those big government buildings with domes and arches, pure Rome. Even the idea of a republic, of having a senate, that directly inspired the founders of countries like the United States.
So I'll leave you with this question. The next time you walk past a big stone courthouse or use a word like senator or republic or even just go to a giant stadium to watch a game, I want you to think about it. What piece of that Roman blueprint are you seeing in your world today?